Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to our event on the social protection for fisheries, advancing social protection in the fisheries sector. So fisheries are crucial for income, livelihoods, and food security, but they face a lot of challenges like poverty, income variability, gender inequality, among others. The SocPro4Fish project, which concluded in June 2024, has aimed to improve social protection in this sector by expanding the social protection programs to fishers as well as their adequacy. So today in this session, we will reflect on the project achievements, discuss challenges, and explore future progress. We will share experiences from Colombia, Tunisia, and Paraguay, showcase some key tools and findings, and engage, hopefully, in discussions on innovative approaches to enhance social protection in the sector. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that this event will be productive and very insightful for all of us. So before we start, I would like to remind us that this session is being recorded. So along with this presentation, the recording will be available on the socialprotection.org website, and it will be sent to all registrants in this session. So Zoom AI will generate automatic captions. So if you would like to see them, click on the CC Closed Captions button. I also would like to note that the final segment of this webinar will include a 10-minute discussion in Spanish. So for your convenience, we will translate this session in the chat box. So I will now pass the floor to one of the moderators of this event this evening, Mr. Sebastian Matthews, the Executive Director of the International Collective in Support of Fish Workers. Sebastian, thank you so much for being here with us today. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, all participants. My greetings to all of you. So we will be starting right away. So the first presentation will be from Daniela Kalikoski. She's the Fisheries Officer in charge of the Equitable Livelihood Team of Fisheries and Aquaculture Division of FAO. I would like to invite her to highlight the main achievements and challenges of the SocPro4Fish project, the countries where it was implemented, the countries she mentioned just a few minutes ago, and to highlight experiences of ways to move forward to extend or to improve access to small-scale protection of fishes. So Daniela, kindly take the floor, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Sebastian. I'm going to share my screen. So Isa, can you please stop sharing? Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen? Can you please confirm that you see?
Yes, no? We can see.
You can see? Okay. So as Sebastian mentioned, I'm going to give you a general overview of how FAO is advancing on social protection in the fisheries sector. And the speakers after me will get into more detail. So I will start my presentation by briefly explaining what social protection is, its three key pillars, and its four main functions. So social protection consists of policies and programs designed to reduce poverty and vulnerability. It helps people manage risks, social and economics, as well, such as unemployment, illness, or old age, by providing support when it's most needed. So FAO works, sorry?
Yeah, I'll just interrupt you.
Your screen is not visible. We can see you, not the screen. Yeah.
Okay, let me try again. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, now we can see the presentation. Yeah.
In presentation mode or?
Yes.
Yes? Oh, okay. Not in presentation mode. Okay, now I think we are all set. So as I was explaining, so FAO is working with the three main pillars of social protection according to the FAO social protection framework. So they are social assistance, which includes non-contributory support like conditional and unconditional cash transfers or school feeding programs given to the most vulnerable in society. The other pillar involves social insurance, which is a contributory scheme into which participants make regular payments to protect themselves against risks, such as unemployment, disability, among others. And finally, labor market interventions, which promotes employment through job creation, protection of workers' rights and entitlements, and provision of income replacement, such as training, public work programs, skills development, and others. So social protection operates to four main functions. So let's start with the protection functions, which provides immediate support, such as emergency, food or cash transfers to community hit by natural disasters, such as hurricane, floods, ensuring that they can meet their needs during crisis. Prevention aims to reduce vulnerability by offering unemployment benefits or temporary income support during closed seasons, for instance. This helps fishers avoid deeper poverty during the periods of restricted fishing, and therefore helping them also to engage in positive coping strategies. The promotion functions enhances capacities by offering skills training in sustainable practices or alternative livelihoods. So this helps diversify incomes and reduces reliance on fishing, fostering long-term economic stability. And finally, transformation, which addresses inequalities such as ensuring fisher women, for instance, to have equal access to resources and opportunities, thus promoting gender equality and inclusion, making the sector more equitable, sustainable, and resilient. So together, these functions provide a better comprehensive approach to building resilience, inclusive, and sustainable fisheries. So why do we need social protection in the fishery sector? So fishers face a lot of vulnerabilities, and these may cause a low adaptive capacity and these negative coping strategies. So widespread informality, for instance, in small-scale fisheries poses a major challenge for social protection. And some of the countries will explain a little bit more why. So many fishers, and here we have in the screen Mambrouka from Tunisia, a 71-year-old fisherwoman that lack coverage due to issues like informality, under-registration, remoteness, and the high contribution rates. So as a result, Mambrouka works without a pension or health insurance. This highlights the gaps in existing programs. So globally, around 29% of population has comprehensive social protection schemes, and the fisheries sector is often excluded given to their unique vulnerabilities. So initiatives such as the SocPro4Fish project are really working to bridge these gaps by trying to identify and eliminate the barriers of access and working towards improving the expansion and adequacy of the coverage. So we are building on fishers' needs and working in the fisheries sector to bring a better coherence between social protection policies and sustainable fisheries management. So for instance, focusing on impact evaluations and designing or redesigning efficient unemployment benefit programs during closed fishing seasons. We are also fostering economic inclusion by setting in standards for safety, for fair wages and job security, as well as for creating and supporting small-scale fishers, including women's access to market, minimizing food loss and waste by processing fish byproducts, for instance, that would be discarded. In terms of shock responsiveness, we are improving the targeting of fishers in relief programs, which is crucial. So by linking anticipatory actions with targeted social protection programs, we are able to provide timely financial support and essential rehabilitation services, helping then communities to recover swiftly from crisis. So social protection is essential if we want to achieve an inclusive and equitable blue transformation. This has been recognized in many of the conventions, in many of international instruments, such as the Small-Scale Fisheries Guidelines, which has a dedicated session on social development, the 2021 COFI Declaration, which calls FAO to continue working on social protection and decent work, for instance, and on the SDGs, where social protection really is a very important target that we need to achieve. So how is the SocPro4Fish project helping to extend comprehensive and adequate social protection coverage? And here I'm going to talk very generally about the areas of actions that we are operating. And again, the countries will provide some specific examples. But we are focused on 4 main areas: the building evidence base, so we can support policy processes to really work on eliminating the barriers. We are developing technical tools to enhance fishers' capacity to respond better to shocks. We are strengthening informal social protection systems, trying to link them then to state-led programs towards a community-based, to integration of community-based approaches and co-management. And we are fostering South-South and triangular cooperation by bringing a peer-to-peer exchange process where countries can learn from each other on the experiences, on the challenges, and on the opportunities. So as I mentioned before, we are operating in 3 main countries, but we also have some regional and international activities. And my colleague will present after me the database that we are creating on social protection in the context of small island development states. So some of the main outcomes that we have achieved in the project is the creation and consolidation of interinstitutional working groups at the country level. So this means that now ministries of fishers are collaborating with ministries of social development, of labor, in terms to understanding better fishers' needs and also to eliminate the gaps that they are currently facing. And again, my colleagues will mention this more specifically in the context of the project. We managed to foster partnerships, develop and strengthen networks. So for instance, yes?
Please, I think we are crossing the time. Yeah.
Okay, I'm finishing. And so we are creating these partnerships at the local level, but also at the international level, such as collaborating with ILO, with the World Bank, as well as with ICSF, as with the presence of Sebastian here. And we are really extending the coverage to support fishers and fisher workers. I'm finishing by saying that we have achieved in 3 years some very, very important policy impacts. So for instance, the evidence that we generated in Paraguay on the needs and on the current social protection programs is helping to support the social protection reform, and it's fostering economic inclusion at the municipal level. In Colombia, the interinstitutional working group on social protection has become is mandated to regulate and to design the implementation of the new unemployment benefit program that they will start in the context of closed season, the CEDEVETA program. And in Tunisia, we managed to work on the recognition of mutual societies as important intermediaries for collecting contributions to the CNSS. So in terms of the next steps, we are really focusing on this interoperability of registry, on continue the evidence generation, fostering these interinstitutional working groups, policy support, and raising awareness. Also, because it's so important that many fishers do not know the rights that they have. So with that, I would like to thank you everyone, and especially Norway for providing the support for this project. Thank you, Sebastian.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniela, for your presentation. I would like to now invite Alison MacNaughton. She's a specialist in small-scale fisheries, social protection, and rural development. She's part of FAO's Fisheries Equitable Livelihood team. So kindly share the findings from the global database of social protection for fisheries, please. Yeah, thank you. Alison, please.
Sorry. Thanks, Sebastian. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here with you all today. As Sebastian said, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our global database. So the next slide, please. The Social Protection for Fisheries database is a global assessment of social protection schemes available to the fisheries and aquaculture sector. This means that the database focuses on legislation and policies that are targeting and also universal protection that may be reaching fishers and fish workers. It looks at different types of programs, contributory, non-contributory, active labor market programs, as well as access to healthcare. It is a very detailed collection of data, uses a delivery chain approach, examines how programs are designed and delivered, tries to identify key gaps in coverage and access, and looks for opportunities where existing programs may be improved, and then also looks for gaps where there is no coverage. Interestingly, the database also looks at how key risk functions faced in the sector are or are not addressed by existing programs. And this includes a special focus on shock responsiveness. Next slide, please. So the data has been compiled through an extensive process of desk review and key informant interviews. There was validation through regional focus groups and workshop activities and an overall review process to ensure accuracy and completeness. Now we're in the process of doing some analysis of trends and gaps and the final steps. So far, we've carried out the process for 43 countries. This includes the SocPro4Fish countries, several countries in the Mediterranean region, as well as what I'm going to tell you a little bit more about today, which are countries in the 3 SIDS regions. So in the Atlantic, Indian Ocean, Mediterranean, and South China Sea, the AIMS region, as well as in the Caribbean and in the Pacific SIDS region. Next slide, please. So here, what we can see is just a really kind of high-level, broad picture of where coverage is legislated across the SIDS region's countries. So if you can see here, this is the percentage of countries in our study that have legislated protection by benefit type. So it's high. This means that the possibility of coverage, like programs exist for coverage for disability, old age, survivors in most of our study countries. So about 31 out of the 34 countries have those types of coverage existing. That doesn't mean necessarily that they are being accessed effectively by fishers. It just means that there is coverage of those types. If we look at the bottom part of the screen here, it shows you effective coverage. So again, this is overall, this is not specific to fishers, but this is overall for countries in this region. Effective coverage remains really low. So the average at country level among the AIMS group of countries is 17% of the eligible population are accessing or contributing to a social protection benefit type. So that means that they're either receiving some benefit or they are actively contributing to a pension scheme if they're in the working age. In the Caribbean, the rates are higher. 49% of people are effectively covered, and in the Pacific, 36% of people. So Unfortunately, one thing that we found in the study is that data about effective coverage for fishers and fish workers is not available for most of these countries. So we can't actually find out what effective coverage among countries are without having a detailed household level study in each individual country to find out that information. So that's a really, really serious gap, and something that we are trying to highlight. What we can infer is that because we know that there are a variety of barriers like informality and lack of compliance with mandatory contribution schemes, that likely people who work in the fisheries and aquaculture sector are among those who are not covered or least covered. Next slide, please. Some other general findings from there. So existing universal programs often exclude fishers and fish workers and their needs. They're not designed to respond to the specific vulnerabilities or situations faced by fishing dependent communities. In many cases, the bulk of the programs are contributory programs in most of the SIDS. So these are packages under a Social Security umbrella or a Provident Fund umbrella that provide different benefit types. In some cases, these programs are mandatory, but even despite that, there are significant barriers for the participation of fishers and fish workers, and these barriers range from legal and administrative to financial and social barriers. Everything from just the mismatch between people's income variability or the high rates of contribution for people who are self-employed, or the variation, sorry, I think I said that already, seasonal income, and then also just the trade-off in terms of the benefit contributions are higher than the amount of benefits that will eventually be received, or there's mistrust of institutions in terms of whether people think they'll actually be able to get those benefits. We see that also most of the universal programs, they target economic, health, and life cycle risks, and where there are fishery-specific programs, they tend to only target the economic risks. So where there are sector-specific programs for fishers, they don't target life cycle risks such as maternity or old age. So those are only covered by universal programs for the most part. We also found that among both sector-specific and universal programs, there are very few legislated programs that cover environmental risks. So when disasters happen, most of the programs that are in place are things that are carried out on a one-off, like a response level basis, as opposed to being something that a social protection system has accounted for and has regular procedures and provisions for. We found that in 9 of the 34 SIDS, there are social protection programs that specifically target the fisheries sector. And there are a variety of these. These range from things like bad weather payments, microcredits, sickness benefits, special insurance programs for fishers, and concessional loan schemes. Some really interesting examples. We'll have to have another session to talk a little bit more about some of those findings in more detail. But there are some really interesting programs that could be very interesting models for other places. We found at the regional level also that several countries have regional level agreements or fisheries sector initiatives that provide additional income maintenance and livelihood improvement benefits. These are things like seasonal worker programs that exist in the Pacific, or provisions for fishing vessel employment through the parties to the Nauru Agreement. Also in CARICOM, another example, people are able to carry their benefits from contributory schemes, which is a really interesting and helpful model. You can go to the last slide, please. So that's all that I have time to tell you about today, unfortunately. In terms of opportunities, I wanted to leave you with what we are finding from the database in terms of things that we would like to highlight as kind of, I think, the way forward, or the next steps. One would be the need for a really strong focus on registries. So looking at what registry data is available and opportunities for interoperability and improving that to prioritize integrated beneficiary registries between social, fisheries, and disaster response registries, to continue looking deeper for opportunities for policy synergies between fisheries and social protection, because there are places where that does look promising, and it just takes more work to get there. And then also addressing barriers to inclusion in the contributory and non-contributory programs that do exist. Part of that can be through improved communications and outreach, and part of that can be working towards opportunities for more flexible contribution models, and then making use of regional frameworks. So I'll leave it at that for today. Thank you. Thanks, Sebastian. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. And we haven't have any questions in the chat box. And if anyone would like to clarify any questions, kindly raise your hand, then we can give you floor. I mean, otherwise we can go to the next session, please. Yeah. And I think just to start the discussion, Alison, I mean, I'm also trying to think loud about the relationship between a universal social protection program and a sectoral program. And do you think that countries that have more robust universal program are able to develop more effective, robust social protection program for the sector? And then vice versa, do you see that strong social protection fisheries tend to contribute to better universal programs? So would like to see the interrelationship between the two, if you have any kind of reflections on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sebastian. Yeah, just really briefly, I think that it seems you're right. There is a positive association between the two. In fact, so countries that have robust universal social protection, a strong social protection strategy, often are the ones that tend to have additionally those sectoral focused programs that try to extend to the fisheries sector and account for some needs of small rural producers and fishers in some cases. Which is a really interesting and a positive thing. I think also we see that where there is good communication between ministries and good frameworks for communication between ministries of social development and ministries responsible for fisheries and natural resource management, that's where there tends to be better and stronger and more innovative programs as well. So that communication is really important.
Thank you, Alison. I think there are a couple of questions. I hope you can see them. One is from Sri Lanka, Shalika Subasinghe. How many countries had programs for coverage during closure? Can you name a few countries that were successful? And then Lee Bells has a question on migrant workers. Are they covered in the fishery sector? Are they included in this social protection program? And then, yeah, these are the two questions which came up for response.
Yeah, so in the Pacific, there are some really interesting, just responding to the second question first, in the Pacific, there are some really interesting programs that relate to labor mobility and flexibility. And I don't have time to go into detail about those right now, but there were provisions in some of those agreements to allow people to be able to move between location and carry some of their access to benefits with them. I don't know if that addresses specifically whether non-residents were accessing programs. I'd have to look in more detail to respond to that. In terms of countries that had programs for coverage during closure, from Shalika, I believe you're asking about fishery closures and not like the overall sort of previous pandemic closures that happened. So I think rather than respond to that question, I'll leave it to a presentation that's actually coming up in today's session that's going to speak a little bit about an experience with that, a very positive experience with that. So stay tuned for more on that.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. I think we will now move to the next session, which is basically the country focus. 3 countries will make the presentation. So this will highlight the achievements at the country level. So I would like to first invite Daniela Salazar to make a presentation on Paraguay, experiences shared from Paraguay. And she's a PhD scholar at a School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. So Daniela, you have the floor, please. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Let me just share my screen quickly to see if you can all see my presentation. Let me just put it on presentation mode. Okay, can you see my presentation? Yes? Perfect. So today I will be presenting on behalf of my colleagues at the Paraguay office. on the work that the SocPro4Fish project has done there. The work of the SocPro4Fish in Paraguay has focused on how to achieve economic inclusion within the framework of social protection, looking at the case study, of course, of the fisheries and aquaculture sector. So today we'll go through a bit of what has been done, starting with a socioeconomic profile of the beneficiaries of the Fisheries Assistance Program of Paraguay, a diagnosis of the social protection programs and how they have reached the fishing sector, and also a bit of the process diagnosis of the main social protection program for fishers in the country. Then we'll move on to talking a little bit about how these three main documents have informed the technical proposals for strengthening the Fisheries program, which we know in Spanish as PROAP, as well as to inform key recommendations to strengthen institutions that are linked to the fishing sector. And finally, we'll see how both of these big instruments or sets of work have then led to technical feasibility studies on a portfolio of alternative livelihoods, which include aquaculture, the development of a training plan for the fishery sector, a mapping of strategic actors at the local level, and then finally, we'll conclude with a bit of the impact that have been achieved in the country. So that's just a bit for context. So the first main knowledge product that was developed was a vulnerability and social protection assessment within the fishery sector. So first we saw that, the project found that some of the key characteristics of the fishing sector in Paraguay included gender gaps, impacts of climate change that were detrimental for the communities, as well as health risks, unstable income, and precarious working conditions within the sector. Then in terms of the access to social protection that fishers had, or the system that they were able to access, the project found that there are contributory as well as non-contributory social protection systems, which included health insurance and pensions. The project also conducted an analysis of the institutionality and the beneficiary selection mechanisms to access the social protection programs, which I'll touch upon in a second, as well as some of the good practices and lessons learned from other countries. So we saw, based on these studies, or based on this knowledge product, we were able to also develop a socioeconomic profile of the program in support of fish workers or artisanal fishers in the national territory in Paraguay. And we saw that as of 2021, there were 4,279 fishers that were benefiting from the program. And that overall, from the total population of fishers, only 58% of them were actually registered as fishers and therefore had the possibility of accessing this program. And that of the totality of fishers that were that are in the country, 97% do not contribute to a pension fund or retirement fund. This already gives us an indicator of the precarity of the sector, not only in terms of income and vulnerability of conditions like we saw in the previous slide, but also in terms of their social network and the possibilities that they might have, for example, to retire, to access a health insurance, and also the fact that they're not even registered as fishers. Taking a further step from this, the program also conducted an evaluation of the social protection programs available and how they were accessible to fishers. So we looked not only at the program in support of fishers in the national territory for artisanal fishers, which is the PROAP, the one that I was mentioning before, but it also looked at 8 other different social protection programs, including a program for old age people, a program for children, food security program, a pension, national pension system, as well as a financing mechanism. Looking at how these programs were actually accessible or were reaching the fishery sector, we found some, or the program had some key findings, which first saw that the PROAP, so the program in support of fish workers, does help financially fishers during fishing bans, because the program is only given to fishers during fishing bans, but it does not actually fully meet fishers' needs beyond giving them some money. So it doesn't actually meet, for example, it needs around a pension, around accessing health, etc. Also, this program, which again is the main program for fishers, actually limits their access to other social protection programs, which can worsen their long-term financial vulnerability on the one hand, or on the other hand, it can act as a disincentive or an incentive for fishers to not register as fishers or not register to this program. And finally, we also saw that none of the programs that were evaluated were addressing working conditions, gender inequality, or climate readiness, which actually leave fishers at risk. After this, the SocPro4Fish project conducted an analysis trying to understand and improve the distribution of the PROAP benefits during fishing bans. So what the analysis found is that in the country there is a within the fishery sector a context of poverty, variable income, and critical dependence on fisheries, as well as the marginalization of women and indigenous communities. To address these main challenges, some of the key recommendations that have been extended to the governments are in terms of methodology, which include improving the accuracy or the accurate identification of beneficiaries, to strengthen the verification visits from the Ministry of Social Development to verify the conditions of fishers that are part of the program, and also to ensure an adequate coverage of the National Development Bank towards the fishery sector. Similarly, this set of recommendations were more on the accessing or extending the social protection benefit of the PROAP to fishers. But then we also had, or the program also had a proposal with the objective to actually use social protection programs, use the PROAP, to improve the management of the artisanal fishing sector through regulatory and technical instruments. Some of the key recommendations that came from this were the improvement of the General Registry of Fishers, so improving how fishers are actually registering as fishers per se. To also, another recommendation was to support families in extreme poverty during close seasons in Paraguay. And finally, to develop policies that will actually manage fisheries resources and that are in coherence with the social protection programs. This proposal sought or seeks to actually improve the economic inclusion, sustainability, and quality of life of fishers through a more inclusive and efficient registration system, better interoperability and interinstitutionality between different institutions, and to overall develop more coherence between both social protection and fisheries. Some of the recommendations that came from this analysis aim more at strengthening the institutions in the country, where around strengthening also the technical, so building capacity of the technical staff within the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Development, and the Ministry in charge of Fisheries, as well as implementing a monitoring and evaluation system and promoting the participation of social actors and international cooperation within the country. In terms of methodologies and data collections to strengthen the social protection programs, the SocPro4Fish found or recommended to develop more surveys and interviews with fishers, to have a technical validation of questionnaires and training to the interviewers that are actually going out and doing the data collection, and to, again, support the registration of fishers, especially from indigenous communities, and doing an assessment of vulnerability. And it also was found that overall, there is a need to improve the infrastructure and resources dedicated to social protection in the fishery sector, as well as to strengthen public policies and social protection programs for the sector. So this was, let's say, the first part of the first part of the project. The second part of the project also was dedicated to building a proposal for the socioeconomic inclusion of the fisheries and aquaculture sector. For these, the SocPro4Fish project developed a technical feasibility study of alternative livelihoods, where it looked at different livelihoods that fishers could engage on during close seasons, but also beyond, to not only depend on fishing resources and therefore have a more resilient livelihood. Some of the aspects that were looked at here, or some of the alternative livelihoods, as you can see on the screen, included things from developing a gastronomy, livestock production, ecotourism, but also it included aspects such as the development of cooperatives and associations, strengthening farmers' fairs, vegetable processing, etc. And to be able to implement these alternative livelihoods, the SocPro4Fish project, working with strategic partners, has identified that there needs to that 6 things need to be in place in order to be able to implement or for the feasibility, let's say, of these alternative livelihoods. First, there needs to be the development of local markets where there are direct sales and product diversification. Then there needs to be access to resources and finance, where there's financial inclusion and management training. There also needs to be the strengthening of cooperatives, where there are collaborative networks and intersectoral cooperation. There also needs to be the promotion of sustainable practices, so adaptation to local conditions and biodiversity conservation. There also needs to be local capacity building, both on technical, so for example, the skills that you need for the alternative livelihood, but also business training on how to make this sustainable in terms of business and financially. And finally, but not least, there needs to be more participation and empowerment of fishers through the creation of cooperatives or gender inclusion within these value chains. So the project also identified that, for example, not only to achieve these alternative livelihoods, but in general to implement improvements into the social protection for the fishery sector, there needs to be more capacity building. So two main proposals have been built. One of them, which is necessarily on capacity building.
Yeah.
I'm wrapping up. Thank you. Sorry. So one of them is on capacity building for technical officers and extensionism in aquaculture, which focuses more on sustainable practices and resource management. And also the other part of this capacity building is based on the professionalization of fishers during closed seasons. So improving the capacities in fisheries techniques, business management, and legal norms of fishers. And the other proposal that has been developed is a proposal for the socioeconomic inclusion of the fisheries and aquaculture sector, which in a nutshell, it seeks to assess and promote the diversification of income sources through aquaculture and other alternative livelihoods, improving the economic and environmental sustainability in the fishing community. For these, the project has developed two main instruments. The first one is a proposal to implement a 5-year national aquaculture program for fishers, so trying to train them to go into aquaculture. And the second is an investment proposal to be developed along the river corridor, which includes 5 or 6 municipalities that will become or could become a source of economic inclusion for fishers and other small-scale producers. Now, to conclude, in order to implement all these activities, the project has also done a mapping of the strategic sectors or actors, at the local and central level. So in terms of agriculture and livestock production, organizations, businesses, and institutions that need to work together when it comes to extending social protection and economic inclusion to the fisheries and aquaculture sector. And to finalize, some of the impacts that go beyond what I've already talked about, so beyond the knowledge production, are that on the one hand, the priority area of the study of this project, which was the river corridor, has now been considered for inclusion within the framework of the social protection system of the country, in particular different municipalities such as Villa Oliva, Alberdi, Villafranca, and Pilar. So now they're quite mainstream as a focus within the social protection system. And finally, another impact has been that currently the Ministry of Social Development is working to improve the administrative records of the registries and the interoperability of the registries, and the inputs that were created through the project on fishers registries and their interoperability are being used in this work. So I think this is it. I apologize for running a little bit in the presentation, but I've been trying to cram all of the wonderful work that we've done in Paraguay. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. And I would like to now invite Mario Enrique Rueda from Colombia to share the experiences in relation to this project in this country. Yeah. Thank you.
Did you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry because the first slides. Okay, let's start. Okay, my name is Mario Rueda. I work in Bemar, in Colombia. So I will talk about this experience of the project, social protection for fisheries and aquaculture in Colombia. This project was conducted with FAO Colombia. We obtained financial support for the NORAD agency. This project, like Daniela explained before, is part of the initiative of FAO about blue transformation. In Colombia, we conduct the project since October 2021, yes, with several activities. At the beginning, we conduct a normative review and analysis of social protection programs in Colombia. This point was very necessary to identify gaps to know the situation about this issue in Colombia. Also, we conduct an evaluation of the COVID-19's impact of the artisanal fisheries and small scale aquaculture also. One activity very interesting was the design and implementation of one model survey carried out in the several pilot sites. I don't see this project in the fisheries topic, but the pilot sites in Buenaventura and Tumaco, fishing ports located on the Pacific coast in aquaculture is freshwater species aquaculture in the continental part. Another activity was the evaluation of the impact of the revolving funds. It is a previous project of the aquaculture to test this implementation in Colombia. And the end of this year, we create the working groups of the project with presences of interinstitutional social protection group. This is the key group. And the second year, okay, we can to test the pilot questionnaire to identify socioeconomic information, very important for social protection knowledge about the fisheries. We conduct this pilot, and the result was very successful because right now this questionnaire is part of the CEPET. CEPET is a statistical system of official system statistics of fisheries in Colombia. Another important issue was the technical input in support of the regulation of the law 2268 of 2022 about the technical inputs for the regulation of the social benefits, seasonal and employment insurance due to the ban. This in Spanish, CDBD. Yes. Another issue with the integrated information system for fisheries and aquaculture, because we have a lot of information on several topics in our country. Also, at the end, we conduct maintenance to strengthen revolving funds and the marketing of the fishery product in aquaculture sector also. And at the end of the project, we participate of the social cooperation to share experience in Brazil. So the principal achievement can be summary, for example, the creation of the HIPRO. This is a good point in Colombia, the hit, yes, because right now it's made up 49 institutions, and he has 3 main action lines: formalization of fishing activity, risk management, livelihood rehabilitation. Yeah. Another important is the support for the regulation of the law 2226 for CDBD with a lot of technical support. For example, the species, 11 species were studied to conduct several technical aspects of the duration, location of the ban, for example. We conduct all the holding workshops with framework of the international interagency articulation. At the end, we combine the two components of the fish development program of NORAD. Yet the social project is component 4 with full loss and weights assessment of component 5. As part of the results, we conduct several work for public procurement. We designed a roadmap for agriculture and public procurement process. The idea was the training fisheries fishing workers. Specific, this picture you can see a female fishing worker called platoneras in Colombia. She inhabit the Pacific coast, and she has a very important role for food security because she sells a low price the fish by catch, for example, of the shrimp trawling. So we conduct several analysis on the measurement, technical and productivity analysis, a special legal framework to conduct that this woman can be obtained or participate in several procurement process, public procurement process. As part of the multidimensional solution is the final result of the full loss assessment project, we combine with social protection. For example, through the activity of handling on board, fishers will increase the capacity by exchanging experiences related to product handling on board. It's very important. This capacitation was very important for the fishing because the productivity inclusion and social inclusion improves in kind to improve livelihoods, environmental sustainability was very important issue to combine to social protection and food loss assessment. Also, activities about responsible fishing. We conduct several experiments. We participative experiment with fisher about the shrimp fishery, small scale. Yes, with adaptation of the selective fishing gear, the Suripera net, which is very reduced the bycatch, and in the impact on the habitat is very low. Another activity was the participation in the Confederation, National Confederation of the Artisanal Fisheries, to encourage and promote the economic and social development of fishing communities. It was conducted in Tumaco. So this activity was very important to strengthen to these fishermen for participate in several activities related for commercial and processors of the fishing. Also, the participation of the University National of Colombia through the management and conservation of fishery products by products. Yes?
We're running short of time, if you don't mind.
Yes, okay. And after the exchange of experience, we conduct the travel of fishermen from Tumaco to the north of the Pacific to share experience, exchanging of successful experience for the fishermen in associative empowerment, appropriation and respect of rules, community management, etc. Finally, we participate with this institution in the Artisanal Fishing Festival in Tumaco, where the government agency will facilitate inclusive participation in this activity for promote several fishing products and to do round table with buyers from the several cities and restaurants on several places, the market of fish. Okay, we produce several educational papers and handbooks, like you see this, and okay, For us, it's very important to see that the social protection is not an expense, it's an investment that dignifies. This picture is part of the workshop conducted. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mario Roda, for your interesting presentation. And I would like to now invite Daniela Akari from FAO office to make a presentation on Tunisia, please. Yeah.
Hi. Then I will follow up after my colleague from Colombia with the experience of SocPro4Fish for Tunisia. Next, please. So the objectives for Tunisia were to support the economic inclusion of fisheries and strengthen the resilience of this community by facilitating access to social protection systems adapted to the country's needs, to Tunisia's needs. The second objective is to enhance Tunisian institutional capacities to expand the coverage and the quality of social services, targeting fisheries and all workers in the artisanal fishing sector. These services, of course, should be adapted to covariant shocks, gender sensitive, and enable better management of fishery resources. Next, please. So the project includes 4 outputs, which will be detailed one by one in the next slides. Next, please. Let's begin with the first one, which is evidence-based policy support. So a study was conducted on gender-sensitive social protection for artisanal fisheries and workers in the fishing sector, which is a study of the coherence between the fishing sector and social protection. The deliverable was a policy brief, an exploratory study, and a social protection performance study, which was developed by the IPCIG and the CREST team. Another product was a feasibility study identifying solutions to extend social protection, security coverage, and quality of benefits to small-scale fisheries sector. Next, please. In addition to a benchmarking study, which was developed on regulations and social protection mechanism for artisanal fishing in countries with similar context of Tunisia. Like you see, data were collected. A huge number of surveys were conducted across 12 Tunisian coastal governorates and touched 4 main populations of fisheries. Persons who were covered by social protection, others were not covered by social protection. There is fishermen who change activity currently, and there is some people who receive social assistance. Next, please. So these data were collected through a socioeconomic data related to workers in the artisanal fishing sector in order to conduct a socioeconomic analysis of artisanal fishermen for a better social protection. Next. The second output is development of technical tools to enhance fisheries capacity to respond to covariant shocks. So a policy brief was developed to improve existing social protection programs aligned with government policies and the variabilities of fishing profession, such as work mobility, the seasonality of the activity, the risk. And next, please, there is a paragraph. Yes, through this policy brief, there is proposals which were offering perspective for improving social protection in Tunisia. One of these proposals is the implementation of the Article 9 of Decree 77 in Tunisia, which allow the recognition of mutual societies as intermediary for collecting contributions to the CNSS, which can make things more easier to the fisherman. It can facilitate his contribution and encourage him to keep his his affiliation, and to pay regularly the contribution to the CNSS. Next, please. The third output is strengthening social protection providers and the mechanism. We have developed a strategy for implementing revolving fund system in community-based artisanal fishing organization in cooperation with the General Directorate of Financing, Investment and Organization Professional. In addition to 2 training workshops to develop and strengthen the capacities of community organization, and this was in order to implement revolving fund systems with particular attention to women and young fishers. Next, please. So to conclude, based on what the project has shown through its cycle, that paths toward extending social protection to small-scale fisheries are: keep the current structure of fisheries regime, but modify them to better meet the needs of fishers, make reporting procedures smoother, and improve the benefits they receive. A 3-part check on contributions can solve the issue of validating with workers with multiple employers in a month, even if one employer won't initiate the declaration. Mobile point-based scheme. Fishers frequent shifts between boats and sector require them to repeatedly join different social security schemes, either independently or through employer declaration. And finally, the consideration to extend social protection on the small-scale fisheries sector is an expansion of the social protection is needs in Tunisia and in all the Mediterranean. And all the problems are the same for the social protection and for the small-scale fishermen. I would to thank you and to give the floor to Sebastian. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Benahel, for your interesting presentation. And I think I just will take 5 minutes to have a reflection. So I think what I would like to say is that I would like to go back to the Sustainable Development Goals, because it's very interesting to note that 4 of the goals talk about social protection. So you take goal 1, ending poverty, has a social protection component. You take goal 5, gender equality, has a social protection component. We take goal 8, decent work for all, has a social protection component. Then goal 10, reducing inequality of different kinds of inequality, has a social protection component. So therefore, 4 of the goals have social protection component, and it's very good to see that this provides an overarching framework to look at the work that we are doing. And then I think in light of the presentations, it's very clear that we are more dealing with kind of covariate risk and shocks when we come to the fisheries sector. And if you look at the social protection floor work of ILO, you can see that they're looking at more the life cycle that Alison mentioned earlier. So therefore, the important challenge is to see how we can bring greater coherence between covariate risk shocks and idiosyncratic risk and shocks that the social protection flows are basically trying to address. Therefore, I can see that when it comes to fisheries, there is a focus on close seasonal events, on resource management, and in some places there is a focus on dealing with pollution, compensating social protection because of lack of access to resources, pandemics. Somebody mentioned COVID. Then the question of species migrating due to climate change impact, ocean warming, coral bleaching. Even in the Paraguay context, I think is very important that we had some very interesting insights into a landlocked fisheries, a more riverine fishery. And of late, is very interesting to note that the water bodies in Paraguay is shrinking very drastically because of heat waves and things like that. So therefore, we can even see that there are different facets when we talk about marine fisheries and inland fisheries. So the ecosystem and the resources itself might determine what kind of social protection measures we need to think of. And then displacement due to various elements of construction or the so-called elements of the blue economy or tourism development, marine protected areas. So there are so many aspects are there. And then we need to talk about parametric insurance, for example, as part of the our social protection measures in relation to covariate shocks. So therefore, there are various dimensions that a sectoral perspective can very effectively deliver to the community. So that and then the social protection flow using a life cycle approach also can approach these people. So as I said at the beginning, we need to see how these two approaches can be interlocked through the work of ILO and FAO, so that finally the communities can benefit from a coherent approach to social protection, which is protecting their life in various stages of, if they're a widow, if you are losing your if you're injured at fishing, or old age, and I mean all kinds of life cycle elements. And then if your access to resources are affected, access to market is affected, alternately livelihood can sometimes come to the rescue. So therefore, this is the kind of combination one should think of. So I'm hoping that this work in these three countries and small island developing states from a fishery perspective can bring many of these remote communities, for example, local communities, indigenous peoples, migrants, women, youth, children, who are outside the worldview of the policymakers to see that, and so that we can bring visibility to the sector, and so that even the life cycle approach can benefit these peoples. So therefore, this coherence is what I think we should aim at, and I hope that this project will lead to a better kind of well-being of the community in the long run. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sebastian. I think that's a really well put way of wrapping up a bit the first part of the webinar today, and to really calling for more coherence between social protection and fisheries management as we move forward. But with that, I would like to open up the question and answer segment for just a few minutes. I see that there are a few questions in the chat, so maybe I can read out loud the first question and then pass it on to our panelists. So, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing the name, but Kafayat Fakoya is saying, another question is whether social protection programs would be responsive to fisherfolk in subsistence fishing, or target only small-scale fishers for income generation. So I'm going to pass it on to Daniela Kalikoski to answer this question. Go ahead, Daniela.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniela, and thank you for the question. I think this is very important. And I think, I mean, there is no, let's say, straight answer to that. I think what we noticed by the impact evaluation, for instance, that we did regarding the unemployment benefits during closed season, in Brazil, for instance, Brazil has one of the largest social protection programs for fishers through the Seguro Defeso. And subsistence fishers are actually excluded in this program. And in the impact evaluation that we conducted, this is actually indeed something that we recommended, for taking care and taking action to make sure that by not including subsistence fishers in this program, you don't marginalize them further. But again, it's context specific, because in the case of Paraguay and in the case of Colombia with the CDVEDA program, both countries actually include the subsistence fishers in the process. So I think, again, this calls for more evidence base that we can really, through factual findings, suggest some very specific recommendations that will then improve the targeting and the richness in the reaching of the social protection program. I don't know if anyone else would like to respond to that, but those are some of the insights, let's say, that we've discussed quite a lot with some of the findings of the studies that we have conducted. Over.
Great. Thank you very much, Daniela. I don't know if there's any other panelists who would want to jump into that question, into answering that question. Otherwise, I can move on to the next question. So Greta Campora says, how are mutual societies in Tunisia used as intermediaries to collect contributions to the CNSS, which is the National Social Security Fund? And is there any register that could help? Perhaps I will direct this question to Manahel.
Hi, Daniela. So to answer this question, I want to say that the Article 9 of Decree 77 exists already many years ago, but its implementation should be actualized. So this article, we did a lot of workshops and meetings with the General Directorate of Financing and Professional Organization, and we conclude that this degree allow to the grouping of fisheries and the SMSA to collect the money from the fishermen and to do the necessary, so to facilitate the task of the fishermen, because the fishermen usually don't have the time to go to the boxes of the social protection of the Ministry of Social Affairs. So this can hugely help them. And maybe a very good idea to encourage the workers on the the small-scale fisheries to affiliate in the CNSS and to pay regularly their contribution. A lot of so in Tunisia, in the frame of the continuity of SocPro4Fish, we planned to do a meeting high level with both Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Social Affairs to discuss about this opportunity, to put it in the table and to go ahead and to do something to facilitate things. I don't know if I answered the question.
Great. I think that was greatly explained. Thank you very much, Manahel. And now, because of timing, let us move on to the next segment of the webinar, which is a panel discussion with the country. So for this, I will do a bit of code switching and switch into Spanish to allow our colleagues from Colombia and Paraguay to answer these questions in their native languages. So let me then switch to Spanish and then presentarles, digamos, a Hazel. Hazel es la líder de pesca y acuicultura y protección social en la oficina de la FAO en Colombia. Hazel, buenos días. Quería preguntarte, ¿cuáles son las estrategias más efectivas para integrar la protección social en las comunidades pesqueras y acuícolas, considerando los impactos de variabilidad climática y la necesidad de fortalecer su resiliencia frente a estos choques? Gracias, Hazel.
Gracias, Daniela. Muy buenos días. Bueno, contarles un poco que desde FAO Colombia y el GIPRO, que es el Grupo Interinstitucional de Protección Social para la Pesca y la Acuicultura, estamos promoviendo un enfoque integral que asegura el acceso a las redes de seguridad social, integrando la gestión del riesgo ante desastres. Esto es esencial en un sector altamente vulnerable como lo es el sector pesquero y acuícola ante los choques climáticos. Este enfoque adicionalmente se complementa precisamente con el fortalecimiento de capacidades a través de la formación en prácticas sostenibles, pero también con la diversificación de fuentes de ingresos y la transferencia de tecnología, lo que permite a estas comunidades ser un poco más resilientes y poderse adaptar hasta estos cambios ambientales o al cambio climático principalmente. En términos de política pública, la FAO también ha sido pionera en la incorporación de protección social en el protocolo de preparación ante la temporada de huracanes o ciclones tropicales para Colombia en un convenio que tenemos actualmente con el Ministerio de Agricultura. Este protocolo es el primero en el sector agropecuario que incluye el sector pesquero específicamente y representa, por supuesto, un avance significativo en la integración de la protección social con la gestión ante los choques de variabilidad climática. Adicionalmente, la FAO colabora con el gobierno para desarrollar y fortalecer estas políticas que integren la protección social con la gestión de recursos pesqueros y acuícolas, asegurando que estas políticas sean sensibles a los impactos climáticos y que también estén muy alineados a dos instrumentos que tenemos desde FAO, que son las directrices voluntarias de la pesca a pequeña escala, pero también tenemos actualmente las de la acuicultura a pequeña escala. Estas impulsan esa creación de marcos regulatorios que promueven la sostenibilidad y la resiliencia en el sector, incluyendo temas de formalización de trabajo pesquero y acuícola y la promoción de políticas fiscales y de incentivos que favorezcan a la adaptación climática, como los pagos por servicios ambientales, los incentivos a la conservación, que estamos también promoviendo mucho desde el GIPRO. Y pues en este contexto diseñamos dentro del GIPRO un catálogo digital de protección social ante los choques de la variabilidad climática. Fue un proceso bastante interesante, un proceso de co-creación con las comunidades pesqueras y acuícolas del país. Y este catálogo precisamente recoge esos saberes tradicionales y ancestrales, proporcionando herramientas muy prácticas para fortalecer la resiliencia a través de la capacitación en prácticas sostenibles y la implementación de acciones de preparación y respuesta. Estas acciones también incluyen un poco la identificación de las áreas de riesgo, la creación de planes de contingencia y la activación de mecanismos de respuesta rápida fundamentales para enfrentar esos impactos de la variabilidad climática en las comunidades. En el chat les voy a compartir el link del catálogo. Es un catálogo digital, lo tenemos en español, pero es bastante visual y muy interesante de leer, ya que, como les digo, pues retoma un poco los temas ancestrales y tradicionales de estas comunidades pesqueras y acuícolas de Colombia, y por ende pues van a encontrar muchas ideas interesantes de cómo ellos se están adaptando a esta variabilidad climática o al cambio climático en sí. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Hazel, y gracias por compartir la experiencia de Colombia, que creo que nos muestra que la protección social no es solamente beneficiosa para mejorar medios de vida o mejorar, digamos, en temas socioeconómicos específicamente, o mejorar solamente temas de manejo pesquero, como se han visto, pero que también puede tener otras funciones que pueden adaptarse a diferentes escalas y tipos de gobernanza para poder mejorar temas como es el de la variabilidad climática. Muchísimas gracias por tu participación. Ahora quisiera invitar a la doctora Viviana Ríos, que ya es la decana de la Facultad de Veterinaria y de Ciencias Veterinarias de la Universidad Nacional de Asunción. Bienvenida, Viviana, y quisiera preguntarle a usted un poco sobre el contexto de Paraguay y cuáles han sido los aportes del proyecto del SocPro4Fish para la inclusión económica en el marco del sistema de protección social en el Paraguay.
Muy buenos días, encantada de estar con ustedes. Bueno, realmente el aporte del proyecto a todos los programas dirigidos a pescadores ha sido realmente fundamental y demasiado importante desde el punto de vista primeramente de la visibilización de la comunidad de los pescadores, aportando a través del proyecto primeramente un diagnóstico de la situación de los programas pesqueros que incluye todo lo que es la parte de registros, optimiza los registros, hay propuestas de interoperabilidad de diferentes registros que estaba teniendo con los que estaba contando el gobierno de Paraguay y que no estaban operando juntos, y que esto hacía que muchos de los pescadores de la población del sector quede fuera de los programas sociales que sí se estaban implementando en el país. Por otro lado, también se hizo un estudio a través del cual se tuvo un diagnóstico de la situación de este sector, identificando las vulnerabilidades del sector, que eran 7, expresadas directamente por ellos a través de sus necesidades y a través de las expectativas que ellos tenían con relación a la actividad. En este sentido, también se trabajó con ellos, se realizaron, son 13 documentos enfocados directamente a cada una de las necesidades de ellos. y de estos documentos otra vez se generaron 3 publicaciones, una de ellas directamente orientada a todo lo que es la parte de inclusión socioeconómica del sector en base a los hallazgos y en base a las necesidades que ellos mismos habían manifestado y a las potencialidades del país. En él se trabaja sobre, por ejemplo, la profesionalización de la pesca, actividades alternativas con relación a lo que es la pesca misma con procesamiento, el sistema de granjas integradas, la acuicultura que ellos estaban mirando y pidiendo mucho, todo lo que es la parte de ecoturismo, sistema de pesca y pague que en este sector del continente se está implementando muchísimo, manualidades, inclusive hay cursos para ya programas todos desarrollados para la parte de cooperativismo y trabajo en grupo. Y también surgió dentro de lo que es el proyecto una propuesta muy interesante que es la propuesta de corredor del río, que abarca 270 kilómetros en un sector o en un territorio del país que es altamente vulnerable, que está conformado mayoritariamente por pescadores, donde se les ofrece todo un maletín o todo un maletín de actividades y propuestas ya totalmente diseñadas. Por otro lado, también se ofrece a través del proyecto al Ministerio de Desarrollo Social una propuesta de un programa de acuicultura para pescadores, por un lado, y la optimización del programa para pescadores, por otro lado. O sea, 2 programas totalmente ya diseñados que ya queda a criterio de los mismos como para la implementación y que sí hay una voluntad muy importante de implementar. O sea que tenemos una línea de base muy fuerte hoy gracias al proyecto, y también tenemos actividades específicas que ya empezaron a desarrollarse, que se están desarrollando ahora mismo, y tenemos toda una hoja de ruta para el futuro también.
Muchísimas gracias, Viviana, y muchísimas gracias por compartir la experiencia de Paraguay, que creo que nos muestra que la protección social no es solamente un tema de asistencia, pero que eso realmente, como lo decía Colombia en su presentación, es una oportunidad, es una inversión para poder conseguir no solo inclusión económica, pero realmente un desarrollo socioeconómico sostenido y también un mejor manejo de recursos pesqueros. Muchísimas gracias, Viviana. Ahora voy a cambiar de nuevo al inglés. I'm going to switch back into English to be able to have the participation from Tunisia. So today we have with us Mrs. Elmonser Sondes. She's a Director General of the Center of Research and Social Studies, CRES of Tunisia. Welcome very much, Ms. Sondes. I would like to ask you, in the context of Tunisia, what are the main challenges that small-scale fisheries face when trying to join a contributory social coverage system, and what reforms are needed to address these challenges? Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Daniela. So the fishing sector faces several risks, both internal and external, affecting fishers, a relationship with social security systems, fisher experience irregular or inconsistent income due to weather conditions, seasonal fish availability, and the lack of structure in the small-scale fishing sector. So besides this financial instability, fishers often deal with job instability. Data from CNSS shows that over 300 fishers who were affiliated with Social Security changed their activities between 2018 and 2022, leading to changes in their CNSS coverage. So external issues also impact fishers, such as competition from large vessels and informal fishers, which leads to over-exploitation of resource and depletion of fish stock. Additionally, fishers face supply issues and have very limited access to micro credit due to the irregularity of their work and income. So given this challenge and based on administrative data, socio-economic studies and research on social security, coverage from artisanal fishers in Tunisia, we propose a mobile system as the most suitable solution for Tunisian artisanal fishers. This system will provide various social benefits and allow members to be both employers and employees, or to work with different employers as needed. So the proposed mobile pond-based system involves contributions paid by the worker, which are converted quarterly into points based on a reference salary or a point purchase value set by the fund. This system will provide benefits such as health insurance, family allowances, occupational injury and disease coverage, and pensions. It addresses the needs of not only fishers, but also other mobile workers like housekeepers, construction workers, and agricultural workers by offering proper social protection. This scheme is expected to encourage more people in similar situation to join. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sondes. I think this is a great experience of how you've grabbed or identified the challenges that are in the sector to register to contributory programs, and then how you've created a solution based on those challenges that really responds to the needs and the nuances of the sector. I think it will be really interesting to see if this is taken up and how the implementation goes. But thank you very much, and thank you to all of our panelists today in this discussion section. Before we conclude, though, or to conclude, I would like to pass on the floor to Nina Christine Snyder. She is the Senior Advisor for the Section for Oceans and the Section for Food in the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, NORAD, to give us her point of view as a donor, as well as some of the closing remarks. Thank you very much, and welcome, Nina.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yes,
yes,
perfect. Great. So ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and for some of you, good morning. It is my distinct honor and privilege to give the closing remarks on behalf of Norway today. My name is Nina Snyder, and I'm Senior Advisor in the Section for Oceans and the Section for Food at NORAD, working with, you guessed it, fish. Today, there's a wide range of partners that are gathered here with different roles and different responsibilities. But what ties you all to the seminar is your commitment to enhancing the fisheries and aquaculture sector. It has been a privilege to hear about the inspiring work you are all doing and to share this space with such a distinguished group of professionals and experts, ranging all the way from small-scale fishers to government policy workers. As we conclude on this online event on the main achievements, challenges, and lessons learned of the SocPro4Fish project, I would like to take this opportunity to reflect on where we were when we first started. It might be difficult to think that it was only 4 years ago, in 2020, that the world was in deep crisis due to the devastating impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Worldwide, there was unprecedented lockdowns, resulting in devastating economic consequences. Seafood products were and still are among the most highly traded foods globally, and restrictive measures against the pandemic, though necessary, were particularly damaging to small-scale fishers and aquacultural communities, which is a sector already crucial to people's nutrition, food security, and sustainable livelihoods worldwide. Although for a long time the importance of social protection as a human right has been recognized by countries through several international instruments, including in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, it wasn't until the pandemic that there was a remarkable amount of social protection instruments implemented to support poor and vulnerable households in responding and adapting to the pandemic's impact. Recognizing that the small-scale fisheries and aquaculture sector reports high levels of poverty and vulnerability, and that this poverty in the sector is linked with food insecurity and malnutrition, Norway reached out to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations to see how we could better support, protect, and empower small-scale fishers in these challenges they were facing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The response was to establish the SocPro4Fish project that aims at advancing social protection in the fishery sector. The overarching outcome of the project was that institutional capacities are increased, making available, implementing, and monitoring social protection programs. And these programs include shock responsive and gender sensitive social protection for fishers, fish workers, and fish farmers. It's quite a mouthful, but what did it actually mean? It means that Colombia, Paraguay, and Tunisia's interinstitutional working groups on social protection and fisheries have now become the official platforms through which issues such as occupational health and safety, formalization, livelihood characterization, expansion of social protection coverage, access to basic services, unemployment benefits during close season, etc., are assessed, discussed, and acted on. It means that significant achievements in the policy arena are materializing, such as Colombia enacting a law to establish an unemployment benefit for the sector, Tunisia revising their current social security system based on the project findings, and then in Paraguay, the government is working to adjust program design features from the fisheries and unemployment benefit in support to poverty reduction and fisheries management. To summarize, this project contributes to assisting and enhancing social protection schemes for fishers and fish workers that are not only a short-term response to a crisis or a shock, but rather that social protection schemes are used as an instrument for overall fisheries and aquaculture development. Norway has been a long-term partner in supporting the drafting and implementation of the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries. And we believe that by supporting social protection programs in the fisheries and aquaculture sectors, we are directly supporting the implementation of the voluntary guidelines. Although there's still a long way to achieve universal coverage in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, we believe that the work carried out so far by the SocPro4Fish project will help benefit thousands and hopefully millions in the future. So thank you for being here today and sharing your achievements, challenges, and lessons learned with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina, for your closing remarks and also for Norway's support to this very important project. I think we really made a huge difference in such a short time frame. So it does not mean that we resolve all the issues. We still have a long way to go, but I think we really learned a lot in this process. So I would like to thank you all for joining this webinar. I wish you a good day, rest of the day, and we will be sharing these presentations, the questions and answers, as soon as we leave the session. So thanks again for joining. All the best.